How's it going, guys? This is Double Wide 6, and today I'm taking a look at a few snowblowers. I had these things out in the shed last winter here. I'm in Pennsylvania. We had a pretty mild winter, not a whole lot of snow, and I ended up storing these things for like a year. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to take a look at them and we're going to give them a cold start. And you know, I usually winterize these guys like this one. If we look in the tank, yeah, that's empty in there. So I have all the fuel out of it, and usually I squirt a little bit of oil in here. There we go. And I leave these I usually leave the spark plug loose. Put a little oil in there to seal it up for the season. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, usually how I cold start these engines, and we'll see if my winterization technique works. So before you even try and start your snowblower, there's a couple things that you want to look at. Number one, there is a fuel shutoff switch, usually located underneath the fuel tank. You want to make sure that that shutoff switch is on. If it's in the off position like this and you're trying to start it, the carburetor's not getting fuel and it's not going to start. So that's the on position. Next thing you want to look at is the key. You want to make sure that your key is in the run position. This one's in the run position. The next thing we want to look at is probably our spark plug hole. Usually what I'll do is I'll prime this engine with a little bit of fuel. It always makes it easy for starting in the beginning of the year. So I'll put some fuel in there, and I also have to fill up the tank. As far as priming it, I just usually use some gas. Good shot like that from the can. And then we'll put the plug in and snug it up. This particular unit doesn't have electric start, so this should make it very easy to start. Now this is something that I'd only do in the beginning of the season. This particular snowblower should start real good, once I do the initial start of the season. Another thing you want to look at is your oil. You want to make sure that the oil's filled up properly at the beginning of the season, and this is filled right up to the top. Looks good. So I think we're all set. We're going to try and start it. Another thing that you want to look at is that the key is in here. These Tecumseh motors come with a plastic key that locks in there like that. If that key's not in there, the unit won't start either. Alright, I think we have everything all set, so we're going to try and give it a cold start. So I pulled the snowblower back into the garage where it's warm, and as you saw, it started up fairly easily. I think it took maybe about 6 or 8 pulls, and that's not too bad for sitting for a year. It definitely would have taken more pulls had I not put a little fuel inside the spark plug hole. But yeah, basically it started pretty well, and it seemed to run nice. So that's usually what I do in the beginning of the season to start these machines. If you try all these steps and your snowblower still does not start, the next thing you need to look at is probably your carburetor. I find that close to 80% of the snowblowers that I work on, and even lawnmowers that have been sitting, if they're not starting, there's a problem with the carburetor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you what to look at with the carburetor. Okay, first of all, I do have a video on my Double Wide 6 channel on how to start a snowblower that's been sitting for a while, and in that video I show you a complete carburetor cleaning. But before you do that, a lot of times your bowl is just gummed up and your main jet on the bottom of your carburetor bowl. So instead of pulling off this cover and sliding off this knob and taking out the screw up here and these two screws here, what we're going to do is we're going to try and reach underneath the carburetor, and if we look under there you can see the bottom of the bowl and the bowl nut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 1/2-inch ratchet and I'm going to pull the bowl and that nut. Alright, so it's actually a 9/16 bowl nut on this unit, and I have turned off the fuel already. So underneath the fuel tank you have that on-off gauge for your fuel. You want to turn that off, that way your fuel doesn't all leak out of the machine. And basically what I want to pull out here is our main jet and our bowl, and we need to be a little bit careful that we don't have any gasket coming with this bowl when you pull that off. So right here I have what I'm trying to get. So here's a look at the parts. This is your main jet or your bowl nut. We pulled that out. That was in the bottom of the bowl. So you just remove that. In this case it was a 9/16 socket, and we were able to get our bowl off. And usually you'll see some dirt in here, maybe even water in there. You want to completely clean this thing out. I usually just use a combination of compressed air and a little bit of carb cleaner or brake cleaner. Spray that in there, and you just take a rag and rub on that. You want to make sure that you get this edge inside here, this lip, all nice and clean. If there's any corrosion on there, you can get an air leak, so clean that real well. And any dirt or debris that you can get off the bottom, you want to try and clean that out, because if it breaks loose it'll clog up your carburetor. So here's a look at the main jet. The main thing to notice with the main jet is there's a hole going right through it right there, and there's a little hole up top right above the threads, which hopefully you can see. Also, looking down the middle, there's also a hole that connects with these bottom two holes. So all that needs to be cleaned out, and usually the best way to do it is with a very thin wire. You could put the wire right through there and clean it out a little bit. If that wire has some little kinks, that helps. You need a wire that will fit into the very small hole up here above the threads. You want to make sure that that's cleaned out, and that wire just barely fit in there. And you can wiggle that, and you can feed it right down through the middle, and you should be able to see it right through that bottom hole. So you just want to make sure all that's nice and clear. You can spray some carb cleaner or brake parts cleaner on there, and then blow it out with compressed air. And that is going to probably cure about 95% of the problems if you're having a fuel issue with your carburetor. If not, if this doesn't do it after you put that back on, then you need to pull the entire carburetor off and clean that. Last thing that you need to look at, and sometimes you get some gas leaks if these aren't working out right. There's a gasket that goes on the bowl nut right on there, right on the head, and then that will sit right on the bottom of the bowl. Sometimes that doesn't seal, so you need a new gasket there. And your bowl gasket looks like this, and this will go inside the bowl, but it'll be wrapped around the carburetor body. So you want to wrap this around the carburetor. When I pulled this bowl off, my main gasket stayed on the carburetor, which is usually the case. But it might come off, and if so, before you put it back on, you want to put the gasket on first, and then once that's on there, it'll hold itself in place. And then you're going to take your bowl nut and gasket and attach the bowl. One other thing that you can take a look at is up underneath here. You can see your carburetor float. You want to make sure that this thing moves up and down nice and easily and isn't sticking. And as I said, if this repair doesn't work, when you put the bowl back on, you're going to end up having to pull the entire carburetor and cleaning that. One other thing I'm going to point out is that the low side of this carburetor bowl, if you take a look, it's kind of deeper on this end. The deeper end always goes towards the low end of the float. So here's our float, this white plastic thing. That low end there, that's going to go to the deeper side of the bowl. Here's another look at a jet screw for a carburetor or a bowl nut. This one's adjustable. So usually it's seated on the carburetor bowl, and then this bottom part with the serrations in it, you can adjust that up or down. So if you loosen up that bottom screw, it's going to add fuel, and if you tighten the screw, it's going to cut fuel off. You'll notice that there's a hole on the bottom on both sides, and there's also a small hole right up above these threads. So there's a needle in there that adjusts up and down. This entire thing can be taken apart, but before you take it apart, you want to screw this bottom screw all the way in and count how many turns it's in. It's usually about a turn and a half, and if you're not sure, you can set it out a turn and a half, and that should allow you to start your snowblower. And if it's not quite running right, you can screw this thing out like 1/8 of a turn at a time, and you know, adjust it so that it runs good and gets the right amount of fuel. So anyhow, I'm Double Wide 6, and I got a bunch of small engine repair videos. You can check out my channel. Thanks for watching, and hopefully learned a thing or two here. Take care.